You don't wake up one day and suddenly accept less. It never happens like that. It happens slowly, quietly, almost politely. One delayed reply at a time. One canceled plan at a time. One, sorry, I got busy at a time. Until the version of you that used to expect more starts disappearing, and you don't even notice it happening. Low-effort people rarely announce that they don't care. They don't stand in front of you and say, I'm going to give you the bare minimum. They just do it, consistently, and they watch to see what you'll accept. At first, you make excuses for them. You tell yourself they're stressed. You tell yourself they're going through something. You tell yourself it's temporary. But temporary has a way of becoming permanent when you never challenge it. You used to expect a reply within a few hours. Now you wait a day. Then 2. Then you stop expecting a reply at all. You used to wait for them to make plans. Now you're the only one asking. You're the only one suggesting. You're the only one trying to keep the connection alive. You used to speak up when something felt off. Now you stay quiet. You swallow the discomfort. You tell yourself it's not that deep, even when it is. Every time you accept the lower standard, you teach them something. You teach them that this new level is okay. You teach them that you will adjust. You teach them that they don't have to try any harder. Low-effort people don't need to be clever. They don't need to be manipulative in some grand way. Your silence trains them. Your patience trains them. Your hope trains them. And the reason it's so hard to walk away is simple. You remember who they were at the beginning. You remember the version of them that was present, the version that asked questions, the version that made effort, the version that made you feel chosen. Your mind keeps replaying those early moments. It keeps whispering that maybe that version will come back. So you stay. You give another chance. You explain yourself one more time. You wait a little longer. But the early version was the highlight, not the standard. What you're receiving now is the truth of who they are willing to be with you. Over time, something inside you starts to change. You stop asking for what you need because you're tired of being disappointed. You start feeling guilty for having standards. You begin to wonder if you're the problem for wanting consistency. You start calling basic respect too much. That's the real cost, not the other person. The slow erosion of your own self-respect. You become someone who accepts crumbs and tries to convince yourself it's a full meal. You become someone who confuses attachment with connection. You become someone who stays in situations that quietly drain you because the alternative feels harder. The training is complete when you no longer recognize the standards you used to have, when the bare minimum starts to feel normal, when you catch yourself lowering the bar again and again just to keep the peace. But the moment you see it clearly is the moment the power shifts back to you. You don't get your power back by demanding more from them. You don't get it by explaining your needs for the 10th time. You don't get it by waiting for them to suddenly become consistent. You don't get it by hoping they will one day match the energy you give. You get it by deciding that the current level of effort is no longer acceptable, and then matching your actions to that decision. That decision is quiet. It doesn't need a big speech. It doesn't need a final argument. It just needs you to stop participating in your own disappointment. Low-effort people can only keep training you if you keep attending the lessons. The second you stop showing up, the training ends. You were never asking for too much. You were simply asking the wrong person. And the right standard was never going to come from someone who was comfortable giving you less. The right standard comes from you deciding that less is no longer enough. Once you reach that point, everything changes, not because they change, but because you finally stop accepting what you never deserved to settle for. Most people don't realize how much of themselves they abandon just to keep a connection alive. They shrink their needs. They soften their voice. They stop bringing up the things that hurt them. They call it maturity. They call it being understanding. But a lot of the time, it's just self-abandonment dressed up as patience. The dangerous part is how normal it starts to feel. You get used to the delayed replies. You get used to being the only one who tries. You get used to feeling like you're asking for too much when you request basic consistency. And because it happens slowly, you don't notice the version of you that's disappearing. There's a quiet grief that comes with this. Not always loud, not always obvious, just a low feeling that something is off. You miss the way you used to expect more. You miss the version of yourself that wouldn't have tolerated this. And yet you stay, hoping things will return to how they were at the beginning. But the beginning was never the real standard. It was the introduction. What came after is what they were actually willing to give. When you finally accept that, the fog starts to clear. You stop negotiating with potential. You stop romanticizing effort that only existed in the first few weeks. Walking away doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it just looks like silence. Sometimes it looks like no longer explaining. Sometimes it looks like no longer chasing clarity from someone who has already shown you where you stand. The training ends the moment you decide your peace is more valuable than their presence. You were never hard to love. You were just trying to be loved by someone who found it easy to give less. There's a point where you stop asking, why don't they try harder? And you start asking, why am I still accepting this? That shift is everything. Because the problem was never only their lack of effort, it was also your willingness to keep lowering the bar so they could stay comfortable. You start to see the pattern clearly. The same people who give minimum effort are often the same ones who benefit the most from your maximum patience. They get your time. They get your understanding. They get your emotional labor. And in return, you get inconsistency wrapped in occasional breadcrumbs. The longer you stay, the more you teach yourself that this is what you deserve. That's the quiet danger. It's not just about them anymore. It's about the story you're telling yourself through your actions. Every time you stay silent, you reinforce the idea that your needs are optional. Real change doesn't begin when they finally step up. It begins when you decide that waiting for them to step up is no longer part of your life. You stop offering understanding where there is no reciprocity. You stop translating mixed signals into hope. You stop calling one-sided effort a relationship. And when you finally choose yourself, it feels unfamiliar at first, almost uncomfortable, because you've spent so long making room for someone else's lack of effort. But slowly the clarity returns, the standards return, the version of you that knows what it wants starts speaking again. You don't need them to change, you only needed to stop accepting less than you were willing to give.